So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where this finds you. A warm welcome to this webinar on the nuclear AI nexus and its implications for the three pillars of the NPT. My name is Sarah Ruspatovsky, and I'm an associate researcher here at UNIDIR, and I'll be moderating this event. At the outset, I should know that this event is being recorded and will become available later on the UNIDIR website. This is the third session of a series of NPT-related events hosted by UNIDIR in collaboration with UNODA that we are organizing in the lead-up to the 2026 Review Conference. Early events in the series discuss the lessons learned from previous review conferences and the implications of nuclear arms control on the NPT. If you had not yet had the chance to see these, you may find a relevant link in the chat. This event is also organized as part of UNIDIR's Science and Technology Watchtower project, which aims to identify scientific and technological developments and analyze the risks and opportunities for disarmament and international security. We wanted to convene this session as the advancement of several emerging technologies and their integration into nuclear systems presents the NPT with both significant risks and potential opportunities. For this session in particular, we wanted to concentrate on the AI and the nuclear AI nexus, on non-proliferation, disarmament, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. We will hear from our panel shortly with some questions to kick off the discussions, and afterwards we'll be opening the floor for Q&A to your questions. To ask a question, please use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of your screens, and unless you explicitly include your name and affiliation, your questions and comments will be treated as anonymous. So, before we turn to our panel, I am delighted to give the screen to Dr. Yasmina Fina, who's a researcher here at UNIDIR. She specializes on the intersection between international security, international law, and artificial intelligence, and I could not think of anyone better to set the scene for our discussions today. Please, the screen is yours, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for having me and for organizing this super timely webinar. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Dr. Yasmina Fina, researcher at UNIDIR, and I've been asked to provide some sort of kickoff scene-setting remarks centered around three questions. So what is AI? What are its different forms? And what is its relevance in the nuclear and NPT context? So as these are kickoff remarks, I'd like to preface by saying that I may be raising more questions than answers, but I hope that this will spark further reflections before we move towards the next segment of the session with this stellar panel. So I would like to first start with the argument that AI is a construct. And in fact, especially in this day and age, in the absence of a universally accepted definition, AI can mean different things and can almost mean everything and nothing, to the point it can get confusing or even unproductive. And so AI is not a thing in and of itself, and it's also why I would like to generally argue that the analogy between nuclear governance and AI governance models is not necessarily always productive or the best, because they're very different technological fields, so we need to take that into account. So perhaps one useful way of looking at it, again with the caveat that there is no perfect one-size-fits-all approach, would be to look at functions and what problem are we seeking to solve with the AI in question. Because AI is a tool, a powerful one, but again, it is not a thing in and of itself, and rather a solution designed to solve a specific problem. And this AI, the solution, I would invite everyone here to see it as a system of systems. Because in fact, the whole ecosystem of AI includes code and software and data, but also a whole system of hardware and infrastructure like data centers and sensors and compute power, which will then have an implication on the performance of these AI systems. And we could argue that AI can be different from other technologies because of the speed and the scale it offers and the host of implications that it brings. But ultimately, I think that we must also not forget that AI is a tool built to solve a specific problem. And so coming back to this idea that AI is to be looked through its intended function and the problem that it is meant to solve, if we look at the NPT, I will not be going into too much detail again because we have a stellar panel today, but I wanted to bring forth a specific example just to illustrate my point. So for example, AI can be used to support the IAEA's work in the context of verification in support of two of the NPT's pillars that correspond to non-proliferation and peaceful uses. And to this end, I can think of two ways AI could be used. So first of all, as a means to collect, process, and analyze open source intelligence at scale and at speed to help overcome cognitive limitations that human analysts may face without AI. but also AI could be used to support information management. So, for example, with respect to the inventory of data and the classification, processing, storage, and access to data to help information management problems, which I think we all tend to face with too many folders in our computer and the ability to retrieve information, right? So again, ultimately, AI is about solving specific problems from the most mundane yet consequential tasks to high impact decision-making nodes. Although the extent to which it is efficient and reliable and the extent to which we're able to manage unintended consequences and risks, that's another question. So finally, against this backdrop, I wanted to close my opening remarks with reflections around three open questions that I would like to leave to the floor and our audiences with respect to the AI and nuclear nexus more broadly. So first, I wanted to raise the issue of security and safety of systems, be it in the civilian or even the military domain. How can we ensure that AI is being integrated into legacy existing systems without compromising nuclear security and nuclear safety? And how can we ensure that the integration of AI is a well-informed decision and will not introduce new or amplify existing vulnerabilities, including in the cyber realm? Second, I wanted to cover assumptions. So how does AI challenge our existing assumptions with respect to the nuclear space? Be it assumptions of security and resilience, assumptions around the security of supply chains, assumptions around decision-making processes, deterrence policies and doctrines, or even assumptions around existing disarmament practices and de-escalation mechanisms. Where does AI fit in all of this? And to what extent are these assumptions challenged due to AI and its technological nature? And to what extent are these assumptions challenged as a consequence of the effects of AI integration produces, and what can we do about it? And third, and last but not least, I would like to highlight the importance of evidence and denoising. How can we make sure that our discussions, be it technical, operational, policy, or even legal, remain grounded in evidence? In an era where not only is dialogue difficult, if not impossible, in an environment shrouded in secrecy and speculations already, and in an era where the integrity of the information space is brought into question with the spread of disinformation, including generated or amplified by AI, which subsequently could have an impact on threat perceptions and decision-making, how can we make sure that we don't fall into the trap of AI hype? And with that, I'm leaving you with more questions and answers as promised, but I hope this was useful and I look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Yasmin, for setting the scene and also for discussing some of the different forms of AI. Really great to have this in mind as we continue. And of course, always great to enrich our discussions with more open questions. So thank you for that. I'm delighted now to introduce Dr. Ian Stewart, the Executive Director of the CNS office in Washington. Ian specializes in export controls, sanctions, and emerging technology control. His previous roles included leading the Non-Proliferation Program at King's College London and serving as a nuclear engineer with the British Ministry of Defence, focusing on counter-proliferation and nuclear deterrent strategies. Thank you for joining us, Ian. Great to have you on board. Focusing on the non-proliferation pillar, could you outline some of the nuclear proliferation challenges presented through AI, as well as how AI-enabled technologies can strengthen monitoring and safeguards of nuclear material? Please, the screen is yours.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and nice to be with you. So, I'm Ian Stewart, as was introduced. To add to my introduction, I spend a fair amount of my time building AI tools and AI systems. And I will share some insights from that as I go through. But also, I'm a skeptic, I have to say, especially of AI in an NPT context. So that might come across as I talk through some of this. And I'm a skeptic about a few different things. And, when we talk about AI and non-proliferation, there's a few topics that sort of spring to mind where people are very concerned about things like AI and nuclear command and control, AI and enabling nuclear proliferation, for example, topics that I'm just very skeptical of. So let me go through this a bit, then we can maybe talk a bit about why I'm such a skeptic. But then I will come on to talk about where I see AI having a utility, and I'll talk mostly about AI agents in that context. Some of this was already alluded to with regards to their utility for non-proliferation verification, which is quite an interesting use case. But when we get into those types of use cases, other people's skepticism will come to the fore and be the principal barriers to the adoption of such systems. So this is a world where there is a need for quite a lot of skepticism, and there is quite a lot of skepticism, I think. So much so that I would almost argue that I'm not even sure this is a topic that should be top of mind in the review conference process cycle. There are more important, urgent, interesting topics that the NPT review process could be focusing on, I think. And I would not place this topic of AI and non-proliferation as certainly top of my wish list for things to focus on. So to give some sort of structure here, I could spend my time talking about AI and nuclear command and control. I've already said that I'm skeptical about that for a whole range of reasons. I just don't see nuclear weapon states building AI into their nuclear command and control systems. But with one exception, and I place this flag because I'll come back to talk about it when I talk about AI agents. Which is with sort of broader situational analysis and intelligence analysis. There is a use case there for AI agents that will inform, not directly interface with nuclear command and control, but inform nuclear-related decision-making and nuclear command and control-related decision-making. But that's, several orders of magnitude back from actual nuclear decision-making. So that's an area where I'm very skeptical, but I do think we need to think through the use of AI agents and intelligence analysis. The next one is the question of AI as a driver for nuclear proliferation risks. Will AI allow people to make nuclear weapons that couldn't before? No, is the simple short answer to that. Why? Well, for a few different reasons. The nuclear domain is very different from the bio domain, for example. Fissile material is one, like you need to fissile material. In the bio domain, you might be able to not have stock materials in the same way. You can't magic up, you can't generate that fissile material. You need the physical materials, which thankfully are challenging to get, and so on and so on. But the other one is tacit knowledge. Large language models are great and useful tools, but I see no evidence, no sign that they can impart or transfer tacit knowledge. And the nuclear domain in particular, when it comes to production of nuclear weapons, tacit knowledge is sort of a really key essential component, and one that can't be circumvented, shortcutted, or whatever. So there I'm sort of just skeptical that they'll help. And then the third pillar, or sub pillar, just to vocalize it, then I'll come back to this. We already talked about AI as a tool for non-proliferation. That gets into the safeguards and open source monitoring point, and so on. Definitely a topic that we should come back to. So those are my kind of three top points where we could spend our time talking about AI and non-proliferation in the review process context. And I've basically argued that none of those rise to the level that there's an urgent need in my mind to address in this current review cycle process. There's just more urgent issues to be addressed. But nonetheless, let me go a little bit further and talking about AI agents a little bit, since I said that there is some interesting things there. And Yasmin already talked a little bit about this. So when we think about how we verify states' non-proliferation commitments, I actually think it goes much broader than this. It could apply in a disarmament context, could also apply in a peaceful uses context, could also apply in an international nuclear diplomacy context. We could be using AI agents for all sorts of things, to have AI agents monitoring data streams, entering into negotiations with other states. There's all sorts of interesting use cases. And I should say what I mean by AI agents is sort of semi-autonomous systems that can go off, look at data, come to some view, decision, separate steps, view and decision about what that means, and act on it. So I see a lot of relevant use cases for AI agents in this domain in general. On the IAEA point in particular, let me talk about nuclear monitoring for a second. So yes, right now the IAEA does a lot of work to systematically collect open source information to help confirm the correctness and completeness of states' declarations. Those are right now like rules-based systems that end in human analysis, as all things should. Actually, I would sort of argue like the role of humans at the end of this process is always going to be really important. There are clear and specific areas, and maybe during the discussion I could share where they are, where AI agents would allow, say, the IAEA to do things that it can't currently do. There have been efforts to build certain tools at the IAEA that didn't quite work out because there are limitations of previous architectures that new generations of AI could allow them to do. But our member states go to accept that. Member states have always been hesitant about even the IAEA using open source information. They've been very hesitant about not like current generations of AI, but like previous generations of machine learning and so on and so on. And I just see a huge amount of skepticism coming from certain member states with regards to the idea of using such tools systematically and at scale within an agency context. And that's a really important point. And then when I think about some of those other use cases that I mentioned, so sure, we could have, for example, we could run simulations where we have AI agents doing the NPT Review Conference negotiations instead of states. There are some reasons that like it might be useful to kind of run scenarios like that. But is anyone going to believe the results? Is it going to be useful? Because it's always, the views of states, views of individuals that are paramount here, not the results of some simulation or algorithmic process. So I come back to my sort of deep skepticism, and with that, perhaps I'll pause and I can pass to the next person.
Great. Thank you, Ian, for flagging some of the areas where you're more skeptical and some very clear answers and examples on where we should or should not expect AI models to make a difference. And as for the wish list, that list seems to be getting longer rather than shorter. And points taken about the AI, it is one of the topics that we're discussing in this NPT related event series, but it's not the first. So with that, I would now like to introduce our second panelist, Alice Saltini. Alice is a senior research lead at the Rhode Island School of Design. She also serves as a non-resident expert on AI at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, a fellow with the Arms Control Negotiation Academy, and a research fellow at the University of Pisa. She specializes in the impact of AI on nuclear decision-making, and she advises governments and international organizations on managing AI-related nuclear risks. So moving forward to the second pillar on disarmament, Alice, I was wondering whether you can walk us through the role of AI in nuclear weapon states' postures and deterrent strategies, and in turn, also on how these developments may influence nuclear weapon states' willingness to engage in arms control and in nuclear disarmament. Please, the screen is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. So then let me just start with the first question that you asked, which is what role can AI play and is already playing in nuclear weapons postures and deterrent strategies? Now, let me take a very quick step back, which really kind of feeds into what Yasmin said, which is the AI nuclear nexus has really gained a significant attention in recent years, mostly due to the rapid advances in AI that have really expanded its potential applications. Now, of course, automation has long existed in nuclear related systems, but what is really different today is actually the emergence of advanced AI systems that can generalize across diverse tasks and to improve as they process larger data sets with greater computational power. So clearly, this has opened the door to applications that can support military decision making and obviously including the nuclear domain as well. So as we saw, these applications actually span the entire nuclear enterprise, but I will focus specifically on those that affect either directly or indirectly nuclear decision-making and escalation dynamics, because these are really the ones that are closely tied to strategic stability and ultimately to the disarmament pillar of the NPT. So let's just look a little bit more closely at how AI might be used in this domain. And I appreciate Dr. Stewart's introduction about this, but let's actually have a look a little bit more broadly. So again, like broadly speaking, AI is seen as a tool that can help human decision makers making better informed and faster decisions, and particularly in environments that are characterized by time pressure, information overload, and uncertainty. So in that sense, really from state's perspective, the key word reel here that we really have to understand in many of the military AI discussion is speed. Now, AI can accelerate data processing and analysis, and again, from state's perspective, potentially giving leaders more time to decide, although with some caveats, as we will see later. But at the same time, many states also emphasize the need to deploy AI at speed. Now, we're already seeing this dual dynamic being reflected in official AI and defense strategies of a number of nuclear-armed states, as well as alliances. And so, really, in other words, we can say that we are witnessing a rush to deploy this technology due to the perceived advantages it has the potential to provide. And so, in practice, AI is viewed as particularly valuable for threat detection, real-time data analysis and fusion, and information processing. Statements from senior officials do suggest that AI will play a role in the modernization of nuclear command and control by automating data collection and processing, or accelerating data fusion, and potentially facilitating interoperability and information sharing with allies, and generally speaking, enhancing decision making. Now, a point that I thought was actually worth noting from Yasmin's remark is that it's true there is a lot of actually speculation in this domain, especially when we talk about nuclear command and control. This kind of feeds also with Dr. Stewart's remarks. But here, really, we have witnessed the statements and actually statements, particularly also in official strategies. So I actually really want to point that out. And so specifically for this reason, we can easily see a role for AI in intelligence platforms for analyzing data to verify missile launch, as well as to support decision-making functions by providing different courses of actions and potentially forecast potential scenarios. There are also actually many other potential applications, but for the sake of time, I'll only mention these ones. What is really important to remember, however, is that right now many nuclear-armed states are engaged in major modernization efforts of their nuclear command and control capabilities, which clearly this modernization creates a window of opportunity for the integration of AI systems should they wish to do that. So having framed that, what is important to underline here is that most nuclear-armed states have explicitly stated that humans will retain the ultimate authority over decisions related to nuclear employment. Now, this principle has been reiterated through declarations and reflected in a number of multilateral efforts. And this really represents an important political commitment and a necessary baseline, but it's not really sufficient to meaningfully reduce risk. And why is that? Well, first, because AI can still shape nuclear decision making, even without direct integration into nuclear command and control systems, because AI generated assessments can still influence how leaders actually perceive crisis. Secondly, AI's evolution still remains unpredictable. And although it is possible that some limitations of today's systems may be resolved in the future, it is also possible that new vulnerabilities may emerge in a way that we can't predict as of yet. Third, states may integrate AI for very different strategic reasons. Some may see it as a way to compensate for perceived disadvantages. And so, under strategic pressure, states may accept higher levels of risk if AI promises speed or better strategic parity. And so, this means that risks are not only just technical, but they also affect perception and signaling. And then the last point is that there is really no shared understanding of what safe AI integration in the nuclear domain actually means, right? So states have not agreed on safety thresholds, nor it is actually clear at all whether whether these thresholds could actually align across different nuclear armed states. So again, these are all open questions. But adding to that, against the backdrop of rising geopolitical competition, as I said before, AI is increasingly viewed as a source of potential strategic advantage in military context, including in the nuclear domain as well. And in some cases, this advantage is perceived as so significant that states may feel like they cannot afford to fall behind. And as I said, we are actually seeing this in many official defense strategies. That it actually is reflected there, it comes across very strongly. And so clearly, all of these dynamics directly affect willingness to engage in arms control and disarmament. So, just to give a few examples, we know that AI introduces new forms of opacity. So, if states do not understand how AI-enabled systems function in adversary decision chains, mistrust can obviously increase. And so that uncertainty could go both ways, could either reduce cooperation or increase incentive for transparency. But which direction it might go, it really depends heavily on the broader geopolitical environment. At the same time, if AI is perceived as primarily as a strategic advantage, states may resist constraints. And as a matter of fact, we are already seeing a tendency among some states to keep the door open to really a wide range of AI applications, alongside concerns that regulatory effort in this domain may be too premature, too constraining, or even misaligned with national security priorities. And so limiting AI integration in that sense could be seen as weakening the deterrence credibility. But it was also an impact on readiness and postures. So if AI increases confidence in early warning systems, some may argue that it strengthens their stability. But if AI compresses decision cycles and reinforces expectations of speed, it may entrench high alert posture and make reductions more difficult. And so in that sense, proposals to lower readiness levels or reduce stockpile may face resistance, obviously, if decision makers believe that responsiveness is central to deterrence credibility. On the other hand, if AI is actually demonstrably improves monitoring, verification, and anomaly detection, they could help mitigate mistrust and make reductions more politically viable. So greater technical confidence in compliance mechanisms could lower the perceived risks associated with arms control commitment. So my point really is that AI does not really push a readiness and disarmament in one fixed direction. It can either entrench, as I said, high alert postures or facilitate reduction. But the outcome will depend much less on the technology itself and much more on how states integrate it into their own doctrines, how transparent they are about its use, and whether they're willing to initiate dialogue and cooperative measures alongside modernization efforts. And for now, I'm going to leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Alice, for a really helpful outline of what might be different today and where newer escalation dynamics could arise, even if AI is not directly included in a nuclear command and control system. I also really appreciate that all our panelists have mentioned concrete examples that make a more vivid picture of what is meant and discussed under the nuclear AI umbrella. It's very useful to have. I would now like to welcome our third and final panelist, Mr. Shota Kamishima, a Senior Coordination Officer in the Office of the Director General of the IAEA. Shota works on cross-cutting policy issues related to nuclear non-proliferation and the peaceful uses of nuclear technology. As an IAEA staff member, he has been engaged in the NPT process since 2010 and currently serves as Secretary to the Chair of Main Committee 3 on Peaceful Uses. Prior to joining the IAEA Secretariat in 2009, he served for 16 years in Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Shota, as we turn to discuss the third pillar on peaceful uses of nuclear energy, it would be great to hear some of the key developments and takeaways identified in the IAEA's Symposium on AI and Nuclear Energy, which was recently held in December 2025. In addition, could you share some of the opportunities AI can present for the states in pursuit of nuclear energy and materials? Please, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it is a pleasure to join this discussion. And following the previous speakers on nuclear weapons and non-proliferation, I will now focus on the civilian nuclear energy. But intersection with AI also brings important governance questions. So the IAES International Symposium on AI and Nuclear Energy that was held in December last year brought together governments, regulators, international organizations, industry, research institutions, and major tech companies. Director General Grossi framed the symposium around the convergence of two transformative forces, the rapid rise of AI and the global transition to clean, reliable energy. And these trends are increasingly interconnected and already redefining the new global economy. The electricity demand driven by AI is expanding rapidly. And nuclear energy is clean, reliable, and scalable, and exactly the combination required by energy-intensive data centers. At the same time, the relationship is two-way. So AI is not only powered by nuclear energy, it also helps improve nuclear energy's performance and accelerate its deployment. So DG Grossi, he described this convergence not merely as partnership, but as a structural alliance, atoms for algorithm. A key discussion focused on the growing link between nuclear energy and AI data centers, which many saw as a significant opportunity. And small modular reactors emerged as a promising option, thanks to their modular design, enhanced safety features, and flexibility in siting, although traditional large reactors will continue to play a major role. And data centers are expanding rapidly, and the nuclear sector will also need to move faster, particularly in regulatory and licensing processes, and supply chain development, and workforce preparation. And this demand is already reshaping business models. For example, the long-term power purchase agreements and greater standardization are beginning to change the traditionally bespoke industry in nuclear. And another clear message from the symposium was AI is not a distant prospect. It is already being applied in, for example, predictive maintenance, equipment diagnostics, operation monitoring, licensing and application and review, and construction scheduling and supply chain monitoring. And one principle was, however, repeated consistently across the board. AI must be understood not as an automation replacing humans, but as an augmentation supporting human decision-making. So human accountability remains non-negotiable in nuclear. So user adaptation, therefore, becomes central. Engineers, operators, regulators, and suppliers, they must be able to understand, question, and challenge AI outputs. So black box systems are incompatible with safety culture. So AI must be embedded within governance frameworks that ensure transparency, traceability, explainability, and clear human oversight. The importance of strengthening AI literacy and also the proactive change management within organizations was also emphasized. In this regard, many experts stress the importance of a graded risk-informed approach. So that means the matching the level of oversight to the safety importance of each case. So for example, AI used for logistics or document management is fundamentally different from AI that influences safety-related systems. So if these human-centered governance conditions are met, and robust digital foundations are built on high-quality, well-curated data, Then discussions also pointed to broader implications of AI for scaling project delivery and supply chains. So there are high expectations that AI could help address the schedule delays or cost overruns that have unfortunately characterized many nuclear power construction projects. So when integrated across design, procurement, construction, and operations, AI may significantly improve predictability and risk transparency, so which may in turn improve the project bankability. And this leads to what I consider one of the most important structural takeaways of the symposium. And what struck me most was the stakeholders expressed both strong optimism and genuine concern. The core issue is more systemic than nuclear engineering. So how to ensure governance frameworks and that enable innovation while ensuring safety, security, and non-proliferation. In that sense, the question is not whether AI will shape the future of the nuclear energy. The real question is whether we can shape the conditions under which it does so. And no single country or company can tackle these challenges alone. So progress should benefit from inclusive international cooperation that brings together all stakeholders across governments, nuclear and tech industries, and the regulatory community. And international cooperation is not optional, it is essential. So here, the IAEA plays a unique role as an impartial technical platform with global membership. It can convene diverse stakeholders and facilitate dialogue and sharing of good practices. It can also support standardization and harmonization efforts, and it can assist member states' capacity building and help ensure that innovation strengthens safety, security, and non-proliferation. Innovation requires governance, and when grounded in transparency, proportional oversight, and shared international standards, it can strengthen global nuclear governance and help deliver clean, reliable energy for the digital age. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shota. Good to have an overview of the December symposium and also what struck you. Thanks also for highlighting the issue of convergence between AI and nuclear energy. And of course, for continuing the trend with examples to consider with the power and data centers and management and so on. Really great to have. A reminder to our audience, if you do have any burning questions for our panelists, please do submit these using the Q&A function. But before we turn to your questions, I would like to ask our panelists to briefly reflect on the potential implications of AI developments on their relevant pillar discussions for the 2026 NPT Review Conference and beyond. Ian, if we could start with you and the non-proliferation pillar.
I mean, sure. Although I think I've sort of already set out my view on this, which is, not a pressing issue now. But there might be other views on that. So if there are other views on that, my question would be, why now when there's other things going on? And then in my example, we talked about the IAEA's potential utility of these tools for non-proliferation verification using open source information and so on. The point in my mind is that's not necessarily an NPT topic. It's sort of it's a Vienna issue. It's a board of governors, safeguards agreements type issue rather than an NPT issue. What is it that needs to be done in an NPT context is sort of the interesting question. Even if there are pressing issues that one needs to address, actually thinking through whether there's something to be done through the NPT review cycle process is sort of key. It's not clear to me what that is. I just, this is I like Yasmin's point about avoiding noise and hype. This could be one of those. It's not yet clear to me what the pressing issue from a non-proliferation pillar would be.
Great, thank you, Ian. I'm curious to hear if you think other emerging technologies also have that same role in your mind, or is it just the AI part? But maybe we can touch upon that later. Alice, would you like to comment on the disarmament pillar?
Yeah, sure. Actually, so maybe let's go very briefly on how AI can support disarmament, because before in my remarks, I talked mostly about the cost, like their impact, its impact on posture and deterrence. But obviously, AI can also support nuclear disarmament and risk reduction efforts more broadly. So, and Dr. Stewart, again, he actually point on some of this already, but like AI-enabled analysis of satellite imagery and open source data can improve monitoring of facilities. It can assist in verification in the sense by processing large volumes of technical data more efficiently. And it may also help analyze historical data to actually historical crisis to identify recurrent escalation patterns and misperception risks. But, and I do think this is actually an important point, most of these applications are politically sensitive because obviously verification, data sharing, and inspection regimes require a lot of trust and great safeguards. So from a technical perspective, current AI models exhibit really serious limitations, including reliability issues, vulnerabilities to cyber attacks, challenges to align these models to human goals and values, and limited transparency. Now, when it comes to transparency per se, this is actually particularly critical in verification context because you can imagine if an AI system flags a potential violation, states obviously will demand to understand why. And so with that explainability, even technically accurate output may lack political legitimacy. Another thing that I can think of is that there may also be governance concerns. So states will question who controls, who trains, or audit these systems. Again, this is actually not an important point. And so if AI tools are dominated, say, by a small group of actors, others may fear bias or selective interpretation, for example. And like another example, verification regimes already require somewhat sensitive data sharing. And so if AI integration, like AI integration may intensify sovereignty concerns if it requires greater access to technical data or if verification tools risk revealing operational details about nuclear infrastructure. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying this may be some concerns of some states. But as I said before, AI can complicate disarmament by reinforcing competitive dynamics. And so if AI is framed as a source of strategic advantage, and so faster decision making, improved early warning, and so forth and so on, nuclear armed states may see it central to futures deterrence credibility. And so in that environment, they may resist constraints, as we saw before. They might maintain readiness or even delay redactions if they believe that AI enhances server availability or responsiveness. Obviously, it can increase opacity and mistrust. And so if states do not understand how adversaries are integrating AI into their nuclear decision chains or related systems, uncertainty may still increase, which clearly may not encourage bold disarmament steps, so to say. And then obviously it may compress decision timelines. And so if AI accelerates assessments and expectations of response speed, it can entrench high alert postures, which are clearly politically harder to reconcile with disarmament progress. But there is also really a deeper structural impact because AI shifts the balance between confidence and vulnerability. And so if AI increases confidence in second strike server availability and detection accuracy, well, then states may feel more secure and theoretically more open to reductions. But if it increases fears of technological surprise or cyber vulnerabilities or asymmetrical advantage, it may really deepen reluctance to reduce. And really in the lead up to the next review conference, I could see this as a topic that might actually even further entrench deeper divisions among the community that support brought like more and stronger disarmament efforts versus the community that actually feel like the current geopolitical environment is really not conducive to further disarmament. steps. So, well, I would have so much more to say, but I'm gonna leave it at that actually for now. And thank you for the discussion.
Great, thank you for that. We already got one question from our audience on disarmament verification, so I would be very happy to hear more about that. And also thank you for highlighting a bit where those divisions might be entrenched even further in the coming review conference. Shota, if I could turn to you briefly to talk about the peaceful uses pillar.
Sure, thank you. Before going that, actually, I realized that I emphasized probably too much on the nuclear power, but also AI is also benefiting the areas of non-power applications of nuclear science and technology. For example, AI is also used for the medical imaging and nuclear medicine, and also food safety, food authenticity control, or even in water and environmental areas. AI is also AI improves patterns identification or enables better prediction under the changing climate. So all in all, AI has really AI is still a tool. No, it's not we cannot have a new area in addition to what we have been doing, but it is improves our works and our services to member states for their sustainable development. Only if it is with the human in the loop and the good governance. So having said that, I just wanted to come back to your original question about pillar 3. So AI and nuclear, including on power, in my view, one of the consequential new developments in this review cycle. And what appears particularly significant as we approach the upcoming review conference is the convergence of 3 dynamics. One is a renewed political attention to nuclear energy, particularly nuclear power. 2, the expansion of strategic cross-sector partners. There are so many the partner stakeholders are now getting involved in our work. And thirdly, the rapid technological momentum, particularly of artificial intelligence. So these 3 elements are deeply interconnected and potentially can scale the developmental impact of our work on nuclear energy. So I expect that discussion at the upcoming review conference, they will reflect both opportunities and challenges arising from these new developments. And of course, today's international environment in the run-up to the review conference is extremely challenging, and I don't need to elaborate. But under these circumstances, of course, there appears to be a renewed recognition of the importance of international cooperation. And what the agency can do is to bring deep expertise, foster dialogue among diverse stakeholders, build confidence and translate shared experience into internationally recognized standards. In doing so, it helps ensure that peaceful nuclear technology continue to expand safely, securely, and sustainably. I'm saying this because reaffirming the importance of international cooperation at the 26th Review Conference would help strengthen the confidence both in the review process itself and also in the broader NPT framework beyond. And also, I just want to add about the non-proliferation area, because safeguard is under our mandate. And I recall that Ian talked about the open source information being sometimes challenged by member states. But of course, I'm sure Ian knows very well that the agencies right and to use the open source information or satellite imagery, or even the use of the environmental sampling that reconfirmed as a part of the 93+2 exercise. As this is the things that we can use within the existing authority under the comprehensive safeguards agreement. So it's very, very established way of our business. And then, of course, we don't take it as a face value. Of course, we always verify that information. We go to the states and then try to verify that the information, state information, the declaration is correct and complete. And with the AI technologies, of course, we can improve our efficiency, like open source information, satellite images. We can really save our staff time, and also we can improve our efficiency and accuracy. But also we have to we are very mindful about what we have to do. We have to follow very specific safeguards requirements, including IT infrastructure, information security, and confidentiality. And of course, we fully understand that we have to preserve human control of safeguards processes and the resulting safeguards conclusions. So I just wanted to mention this. Thank you.
Yes, I see Ian would like to make a point, and then we have quite a few questions to go through. So please, Ian.
Thank you. So this is sort of a response to a few things I've heard in this session, and it's great to be on this session with colleagues. But one thing that occurs to me is, in arms control agreements, we might think about the idea of accountable items. Talking about the unit of verification, the thing that will verify. We might also think about things like national technical means, which are what states have access to, can leverage on their own, without it being formally part of the verification mechanism. And then there's the tools that exist within the whatever agreement it is that allow the verification. So where in that spectrum will AI sit? Will it be the accountable item? Probably not, because usually that would be the missile or the warhead or whatever it is. Will it be part of the national technical means? Almost certainly. But partly that's because it's not formally part of the verification mechanism or measure. And partly, I think it will probably fit more in the national technical means part because it's sort of hard to envision how you would negotiate to include AI verification into an arms control agreement. What would that mean in practice? How would you bound it? How would you define it and ensure with the level of confidence that we do with the tools that go into arms control measures, how it would work and how it would be accurate? And then I sort of go a step further. And it's quite interesting to think about unmanned air vehicles, uncrewed air vehicles for a second, and how you would verify whether such a system was AI enabled or not. And this is one I often come back to because it's just hard, and it sort of demonstrates some of the challenges in doing so. Because the autonomous system, so let's say you had a UAV that could go off and target, civilians and, a very negative system. So where would the autonomy be? Would it be on the UAV itself? Would it be on the ground station? Would it be somewhere separate from the ground station in some other, command point? It could be in any one of those places. And realistically, from a verification perspective, there's no prospect of being able to go in and see it and verify it. And if you can't go in and see and verify it, you can't build it into a verification mechanism. So I think that's sort of an interesting rubric to kind of think through some of this stuff of like what actually is the thing that we'd be verifying or accounting for here. And it just looks a bit difficult to me.
Great. I think it's one of the cases where the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So thank you for giving us more and more questions to explore. We do have quite a few questions. One's also on nuclear disarmament verification. The second one is about the use of AI to assist delegations, and the third is about nuclear risk reduction. So let me just walk through them, and then I'll go according to the panelist order, and you can choose which questions you would like to answer. So our first question is from Mr. Donald Sharabira, apologies for pronunciation of the name, from the Permanent Mission of Zimbabwe in the New York mission for UN. The question is, what are the risks associated with the use of AI in nuclear disarmament verification, including reverse engineering and the leakage of sensitive information? Our second question is about AI and delegations. And it goes as follows. The NPT review process itself generates huge amounts of information and requires delegations to identify and address aligning and misaligned views from such information. Delegations often struggle with limited resources to do this. What role could or should AI play in the actual diplomatic process of the review conference? And finally, on nuclear risk reduction, the question is there appetite among states parties or supporting institutions for a standing analytical capability that tracks AI-related nuclear risks and translates them into practical risk reduction measures relevant to the NPT process? So those are quite a few questions and also all very interesting. Ian, would you like to go first?
Well, so maybe I'll pick up on the question of how AI might help in the NPT Review Conference process and cycle. And this is quite different from what I've been talking about so far. But I said at the start that I spend a lot of my time building AI tools for different purposes. And this is one where I hope someone is investing time to do something useful, because there are useful things that could be done here. I spend a lot of time pulling archive materials from the early NPT negotiations, and the early review process conferences and so on. History that's entirely forgotten, actually, including where we've discussed and resolved some points that kind of come up again and again. So there is clearly simply a data management point here of someone should go off and build a platform that holds the whole NPT negotiating history and all of the documents from all of the committees leading up to this point. In a way that's firstly searchable, because before you can do useful things with AI tools, you have to make the data searchable, discoverable, usable. And then you can kind of use AI agents, and this is why I started talking about AI agents to do interesting things, to go through the negotiating history and do things like build timelines, for example, because it's often useful to build chronologies of when certain things were discussed and how that varied over time. So there's some really interesting things that could be done there, and it's very practical and good uses of AI, and I hope people are doing that. I also sort of slightly facetiously said maybe you could have AI agents negotiate arms control agreements amongst themselves. Some colleagues of mine have spent some time thinking about that, and it's an interesting use case. Not necessarily to get to a practical agreement, although maybe it could do that, but also just to kind of test the space. So we only really negotiate internationally on things that we really care about, on high priority issues. There's probably a whole load of issues where if you just had more time, more bandwidth, more energy, more interest, you could also negotiate on things. Maybe you could use AI agents to kind of negotiate amongst themselves and come back to you with a list of potential areas where you could reach agreement that are sort of low-hanging fruit, because right now we don't care enough about them because they're not the top priority issues, but it would help in some way. So there's some kind of interesting things there that I think are worth thinking through. But when it comes to use of AI in sort of the NPT review conference cycle, start with the basics. Just get data, make data be discoverable, and then kind of build from there. And if we don't even have discoverable and easily usable data, then you can't really build anything useful on top of that.
Great, thank you. I think diplomacy would look very different if it was AI agents who were negotiating everything. There are a few follow-up questions for you, Ian, but I do want to give the floor first to Alice and Shota. Alice?
Follow up on Ian's comments and perhaps actually looking at ways on how we can actually address AI within the NPT context. I appreciate there are diverging opinions on this and whether it should be tackled under the NPT or not. But let me maybe offer a way, again, following on Ian's comment on how perhaps we can actually bring this within this context. And what I think is actually very important that we keep in mind is that perhaps within the NPT context that we should really, really avoid discussions on perhaps AI integration with more sensitive issues such as nuclear command and control. Now I'm mentioning this because there has been actually big debate surrounding the recent First Committee resolution on AI and NC3, in which they actually tried to tackle this intersection and really just by acknowledging that risks still exist even with humans in the loop. And they actually really looked at, like really tackling this intersection a little bit more deeply. Now, from the explanation of votes that we can see from countries, it is very, very clear that, this particular discussion should perhaps rest mostly within nuclear weapon states or nuclear armed states in this sense, because it does raise a lot of sensitivities. They do not feel comfortable sharing in a broader environment. And so with that being said, if we actually think about taking this discussion within the NPT, there are ways in which we can think about particular applications like the ones that we discussed, all of us three actually discussed in this panel, that can give a clear stake to all countries to actually discuss about this without going into sensitivities that and actually deeper discussions that that would not, let's say, lead to meaningful discussions, so to say. Not meaningful discussion, but perhaps will just lead to an impasse, right, in this discussion. So perhaps really focusing on lower stakes applications, as we were just saying before, or at least like if we think about the disarmament context, if we think about lower stakes applications on how AI can help actually reduce the risks of unintended escalation, well, that could be a meaningful starting point that can create, that can at least start the discussion and can create common ground among all relevant stakeholders. Because as I mentioned before, I fear that this discussion might further entrench the already existing divide between, disarmament, the disarmament communities and the community that actually feels like the current environment is not conducive to it. So instead of just like furthering this divide, we really should find a way to actually build on common ground. And I do see this as a way to perhaps build on common ground, and that gives everyone a clear stake in the debate.
Great. Thank you for that, Alice. Shota, would you like to comment on nuclear disarmament verification or how AI could support delegations, or more broadly about nuclear risk reduction?
Okay, so maybe let me take up the second item, that is how a delegation can better access the information on the NPT. It took really long time for me also to to be confident in accessing the right documents for the NPT, because there are so many documents. But I find actually the UN and also UNODA, they have a very meticulously, they provide all documents available, and then in a way that is, in my opinion, very easily understandable for all the participants, including myself. And with that, and also, to be honest, I also sometimes access the external the links to the UN, for example, like reaching critical level, and they also have a very good archive mechanism to make all the relevant documents available to the public. But this is talking about AI. This is actually implies a very important point, because AI is, I'm not really AI expert, but I know that the AI strength is really built on the digital information foundation based on the quality data, right? So from that point of view, agency is also doing our work to improve AI's accessibility to our publication. We have so many publications, and sometimes we receive the same feedback from our member states. It's so difficult to access our document, to understand what is there. So we during the AI conference, we announced our partnership with a US company. I think this is a startup for the AI to collaborate, a kind of a proof of concept to improve the like a mining data, like an ingestion of our data, and also structuring, like data tagging and also taxonomy, so that the broader public can have better information access to AI access to our information. I'm sure UN must be doing the efforts much bigger scale. But this is a quite interesting and important point. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for also bringing those topics into the conversation. Yasmin, I saw you wanted to maybe address one point that Ian made, and I do want to include you in the conversation. We do have more questions, but I think it would be good to hear your 2 cents now as well.
No, thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to quickly jump on the very interesting point, Ian, you made about verifying the use of AI more generally, including in the case of uncrewed systems, and how do you actually verify that that AI has actually been used and the extent to which it has been used. At least like coming from the AI space, something that we've been looking at in our research is to also leverage existing practices and policies and within the military space and how that can be leveraged to provide the level of information that you need to verify and to support, for example, the conduct of effective investigations, which constitute a legal obligation under international law. And we found that, for example, militaries generally have standard practices with respect to documentation. And so how we can leverage those sort of existing military practices with respect to AI deployment and use, I think that could be a very interesting avenue to sort of explore. And I think that also sort of highlights the value of cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral exchanges like the one that we're having at the moment, where I think there's a lot of best practices that the AI field can learn from the nuclear space, but also vice versa, to support the integration of these 2 different areas of technology. So I just wanted to quickly jump on that because I thought it was super interesting.
Great. Thank you for that. Really great to have an ongoing conversation on different points that are made, and it makes it seem like we're all in the same room. So we also have another follow-up question for Ian, but please, everyone, feel free to address. And we also have a question about quantum, so I'll just read those out. So following Ian's point on challenges and location related to disarmament verification, there's always a gap between tech and political reality, and requires clarity on the methods and procedures. With that in mind, are there any feasible priority areas for integrating AI in nuclear disarmament verification? Are there any low-hanging fruit? And then as for the quantum question, how would the coming of quantum computing impact application of AI as far as stockpile stewardship programs are concerned, especially as nuclear arms control arrangements are coming under strain and the possibility of nuclear tests appear on the horizon? Could AI and quantum computing reduce the probability of resumption of nuclear weapons testing? Very curious to hear everyone's thought about this. We haven't really mentioned quantum thus far. So yes, Ian, would you like to go first again?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. And you had also started asking, or saying you might ask me about other emerging tech a bit earlier, because I'm an engineer by education and training, but I'm a sort of skeptic when it comes to many things. AI, I've sort of shared my skepticism. Quantum, don't get me started on that, although I will. And then we could also talk about hypersonics and why I'm very skeptical that it actually changes anything meaningful in terms of the types of issues that we would talk about. I don't have time to kind of share all my thoughts on all of those things. So let me respond to 2 points here. So the first one is the question of low-hanging fruit in AI for nuclear disarmament verification. And I'm not sure. I need to put some more thought into this, but one thing that I think will happen, maybe because if someone else doesn't do it, then maybe I will just do it. But so we have IAEA inspectors, of course. So we have safeguards inspectors. It won't be long, I think, before we also have AI agents, safeguards agents. Not necessarily in IAEA context, but someone's going to build a tool that will, for every country, monitor news feeds and other things and report what they're seeing with regards to nuclear topics. It could be nuclear disarmament topics, could be nuclear armament topics, it could be other things. And then we'll have this stream of, for every country in the world, a little AI agent running somewhere that says country X, the Prime Minister of country X just said thing Y on this topic. And then someone will also do something similar for every nuclear facility in the world that says, something, there's an anomaly with facility X. It's been, it was started up 2 months ago and suddenly it's been shut down. That's an unusual operating parameter that could be, suited to plutonium production, whatever it is. But we'll have this proliferation of AI agents that are monitoring everything, monitoring countries, monitoring facilities, monitoring statements from people, monitoring statements from governments. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but it's just something I see happening because it's so easy to do. And I've been running some experiments to figure out how much it would cost to implement, not necessarily implement it, but to run that. And once you actually build a system, it's very inexpensive to kind of have a little AI bot running and monitoring these things. So so that's one thing that I think is probably on the horizon, for good or for ill. On the quantum question, so I draw on different views here. Partly, I'm also a nuclear engineer that has some particular views on this. So let me just say very clearly, without necessarily justifying what I'm going to say, no, quantum computers are not going to stop future nuclear tests. There is, and this is unfortunate to say, but there is always going to be some utility in actual nuclear weapons tests. Hopefully we can stop those from happening. I'm not advocating for a resumption of nuclear tests in any way, but we always have to recognize that there will be some utility that nuclear weapon states would derive from nuclear weapons tests. The issue isn't no utility, it's whether we can make the utility that would be derived from nuclear weapons tests small in comparison to the consequences of resuming nuclear weapons tests. And for now, that's holding. As states move to introduce new nuclear weapons designs and so on, I'm very skeptical. Well, I'm not very skeptical, but I'm somewhat skeptical that that balance will continue to hold, and quantum computers are not going to solve that.
Thank you, Ian. Shota, when we get to you, I'm also curious to hear what you think about the safeguard agents point. And also, I'm just curious if there's more of an increase with AI, there's also more hallucinations and how we deal with that if more and more people or processes are dependent on it. But Alicia, would you like to comment?
No, at this point, not very much, apart from just actually agreeing very much with Ian's comments. Perhaps just like another minor point, I think I forgot to answer one of the questions from the permanent mission of Zimbabwe. It's just like something to reiterate because I've already addressed it in my presentation, but the question was about what are the risks associated with disarmament of verification, including reverse engineering and leakage of sensitive information. Well, and actually this touches a little bit also on your on the question, Sarah, Ruth, that you just asked about hallucinations. But what I did draw from my presentation was that, as I mentioned before, like really current AI models do have like some serious limitations that do range from hallucinations, vulnerability to several threats, alignment, and transparency. Again, when it comes to transparency, which is absolutely critical in verification context, because if an AI system does flag a potential violation, states will want to know, to understand why that happened. And so obviously, if we have limited explainability in that sense, even assuming that outputs are technically accurate, they still may lack political legitimacy. And again, another point that I mentioned was the governance concerns that actually may come up, because states may question who controls, trains, and audits these types of systems. And so that way they may fear bias or selective interpretation. And then the last point that I mentioned, which is actually directly relevant to the question, which is verification regimes already somewhat require quite of like sensitive data sharing. And so in that sense, if AI integration, actually AI integration may intensify in some ways sovereignty concerns if it requires greater access to technical data, or if this verification tools risk revealing operational details about nuclear infrastructure. Again, like Ian made actually really good points to cap this specifically. Just wanted to reiterate that, since this was actually asked in the question specifically.
Great, thank you. And it's also good to highlight where a process is already quite difficult if we're talking about transparency, and how it could just kind of get even more complicated when we introduce newer actors or actors that not everyone is aware what they can be. Shota, please.
Yeah, okay. So AI inspectors and those things are very interesting to hear. But of course, now I am from the agency, and safeguards is the cornerstone of our work. And of course, our most important asset is our inspectors. And we have to have a human there. So I'm not sure whether I fully understand what Jan wanted to say, but of course, we started using AI for various purposes, for efficiency gains or accuracy. However, we always have the human in the loop, and then that will not change. And so I just wanted to mention, it's not only safeguards, but also safety, security, the governance is the most important thing to safeguard our work, no? Impartiality and independence of our work. So, because I'm representing the agency for this meeting, so I have to make it clear to you all. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that. I don't see any other questions, and I can see that we have another 10, 15 minutes or so. So I would like to maybe give you all the opportunity to give a 1-2 minute concluding remark, generally to conclude what you've already mentioned, but also maybe some reflections on what you've heard or some common trends. And also if you'd like to comment on any other, very briefly, because we do want to focus on nuclear AI in this event, but some other emerging technologies. Sometimes when you go to these conversations, the topic is emerging technologies can impact nuclear systems or ABC. So maybe if you have another example from the cyber domain, or if you're very skeptical about hypersonics or anything like that, please use this opportunity to just mention it very briefly, and then we will conclude the session. Maybe if we go in reverse order, Shota, maybe we can start with you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to highlight that I mentioned that the three things would be important, in my opinion. Increase attention, the political attention to nuclear energy, particularly nuclear power, and also involvement of strategic partnership, and thirdly, the emerging technology and AI. And these are all interconnected, in my opinion. And particularly today, we mostly talk about what AI can do for nuclear, risks and opportunities on all three pillars, right? But we must not forget that nuclear can do for AI. Because for AI is developing very, very fast and globally. Bottleneck is energy. And nuclear can provide perhaps very irreplaceable contribution to support the data center. Not only that, but of course the global energy demands. So I think we have to keep that in mind also. It's not one way, but it's a two ways, AI and nuclear. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just maybe one reason why we call it the nuclear AI nexus, to cover both ways. Alice, please.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Again, like I just would like to reiterate, like from a governance perspective, from the, like policy, like from the governance perspective, how we can move this conversation further. And I think really this event that UNIDIR has been like as planned is actually really, really, really important in the lead up to the next review conference, because there are ways in which AI could potentially enter this discussion. But as I said before, with the caveat that this should not touch on issues that might actually further divide existing divide. So to say, I don't know if it's actually very clear, but basically what I said before is that there is already a lot of ongoing discussions about somewhat speculative ways on, like AI integration with nuclear command and control or other nuclear relevant systems that actually touch on the nuclear decision-making architecture. Now, again, although those are really exceptionally important things that should be discussed, given the voting pattern from the last resolution in first committee, it is really, really clear that there is a lot of reluctance from a lot of states, and not just nuclear armed states, but also allies in general, to actually discuss this issue, within the first committee framework, and more broadly, perhaps under the UN umbrella. And this is partly because, again, as I said, like there are sensitivities at play, and if you really want to continue this type of discussion, obviously the NPT is not the right forum to do that. With that being said, there should be an encouragement from the broader international community at large to facilitate discussions at this intersection, again, AI nuclear command and control, for example, between relevant stakeholders, so across nuclear armed states. But in the meantime, the NPT will tackle, and probably should tackle, in my personal opinion, is actually its effect on the three pillars. As I said before, in the within the disarmament pillar, there are more lower stakes applications that we can think about AI as playing in a positive way that can help reduce the risk of unintended escalation. And again, like framing it this way, it will give a clear stakes to everyone to actually start this discussion, and perhaps actually creating common ground that can lead eventually to further discussions to more higher stakes. But for now, I think this is actually the best way that we could integrate this type of discussion.
Great, thank you so much. The search for common ground continues. Ian, please.
Do I have anything to add? So I guess the other thing I think a little bit about is the potential utility of AI to help states from a regulatory perspective. So this isn't a non-proliferation point. Well, I mean, it sort of is. I spend a lot of my time going out to other countries to help them implement export controls and a whole load of other things. And it's hard, like technical topics for many countries around the world are hard to implement because you have to adopt legislation, you have to set up responsible agencies or licensing agencies or whatever it is, and then you have to implement things in practice. From my little export control world, I think a lot about where AI might help with that. But in the context of this conversation, I also think about it in relation to things like peaceful uses and how we help countries get ready to have nuclear power, because then there's still a significant regulatory requirement that needs to be put in place. And it is worth thinking through. We can use AI agents to help map existing regulatory structures and identify gaps in regulatory structures and so on. So very different from what we've talked about, but there are things like that are kind of a bit novel and interesting to think about. They are sort of outside how we're framing this conversation that I think are quite interesting too. You asked if I'd want to say a word on hypersonic systems. I mean, maybe it's just too far outside of the scope of this conversation. Other than to say, so Alisa made the point that I sort of agree with, that the key concern is speed of decision making. It's only actually in a few circumstances where speed of decision making are really instrumental or crucial in nuclear command and control stuff. And then what people usually think with regards to hypersonics is that it changes the speed calculus, and of course it probably doesn't really change the decision-making time of time of flight in a significant way. what hypersonic missiles are evading missile defenses. So then when you get into the type of discussion where you're talking about missile defense, about hypersonics, you also have to talk about missile defenses and the interaction between those two things. And that is a discussion that I do not see value in having in the context of the NPT Review Conference process. So I'll pause there.
Great, thank you. It's really great to have speakers from very different worlds come all together. So we have from the IAEA, from export control, and I know Luci speaks a lot about nuclear and the AI and command and control. So it's really great to have all these perspectives here about the speed of decision making, also a point that Alicia made quite frequently. So really great to have you all here and really appreciate it. So as our time dwindles, all that remains for me is to thank our esteemed panelists. So again, thank you, Ian, Alice, Shota, and Yasmin for joining this discussion. Thank you to all those joining us online and giving us your time and also your very active participation in this discussion. The questions were very interesting, so thank you for getting involved. I'd also like to especially thank Louisa and Clarice from the UNIDIR team for helping make all this work. We would also like to express our gratitude to the government of Switzerland for funding the NPT event series and the EU for supporting this event on nuclear AI. The next event in this series will be on nuclear risk reduction in the NPT Review Conference, and will be a hybrid event on the 21st of February. So those who are based in Geneva, you're very welcome to join us in the Palais. And the registration link for those who would like to attend virtually is available in the chat or on the website. Before closing, if I can encourage you all to complete our online feedback form, that would be really great. It only takes a couple of minutes and your feedback is much appreciated. That is it. Have a good afternoon, good day, or night, depending where this finds you, and hopefully see you in our next event. Bye for now.